Hello friends, you are about to watch the recording of our webinar, Excel to Power BI. Click on the button here to sign up for future webinars. We conduct these each month and plan to cover new material with updates to Power BI. This recording is about 40 minutes long. There was more than an hour of additional questions and answers, which we have trimmed to keep the video brief. Sign up for our future webinars where you can participate in the Q&A sessions. Welcome. Well, we are Power Pivot Pro. We focus on Power BI, but the crowd that is near and dear to our heart is the Excel crowd. That is my background. That's where I come from. We have our blog, powerpivotpro.com. We have 2 posts every week, 800 plus blog posts in total. We offer training, lots of training options, recorded, live online, live in person, on site, and we do consulting as well. We are a Microsoft partner. If you are interested in working with us, contact us at empower@powerpivotpro. My name is Avichal Singh. I just go by Avi. So we've done this a few times. This time I'm going to focus more on the demo and keep this section short. So I'm going to talk about Power BI. What is Power BI? Well, for one, it's the Power Star toolset. And for those who have worked with these tools, these have been around for a while now. Power Pivot was the firstborn in the Power BI family, and that's been around since 2009. Longer so if you consider the Codename project. So that's the set of tools, and some of you may be familiar with that. Right? So that's one meaning of when people say Power BI. Although these days, when you hear Microsoft talking about Power BI, they're talking about something very specific. They're talking about PowerBI.com, which is BI in the cloud, software as a service. Okay, just glancing at the questions. That's not the only Power BI in town, though. I want you to realize that you can use both of them together or one or the other. It's your choice. For a lot of folks, depending on the organization you're working at, PowerBI.com is not an option, which is being explored right now or may even be in the future. But even then, Power BI is available to you in the form of tool sets. Typically, you would see them as add-ins to Excel. In the conversation today, we will focus on PowerBI.com. That's where it seems to be the most interest these days. But I'll be happy to cover kind of the Power BI tool set in the Q&A as well. And that's an option. For those of you who had been familiar with the prior tool set, sometimes you look at the new world and you panic. You're like, hey, all of that is gone. Power Pivot is dead. Well, it's not dead. There's been a lot of renaming, and for good reason, I suppose. So you would not see a lot of these old names, Power Query, Power Pivot, Power View, in the new world, right? You would see more generic terms, get data, data model, report, and so forth. And I think that's good. That takes away a lot of the confusion. Why use Power BI? Well, if you look at how things worked earlier, there was these few folks who kind of they had the purse strings of BI, they had access to high-end tools, they had expertise in these tools, but these were the ones doling out BI in small pieces to everybody kind of on the front line, the business users, who were using Excel, which is a great tool, but doesn't really scale up, doesn't really provide that enterprise level BI. And really, life was tough for both groups. The promise of Power BI is BI for everyone, right? It makes it accessible for that business user to be able to do things which was only the domain of a privileged few. And hey, not just the business user, it's great for the IT folks as well, because now they're unburdened. Now they're unburdened to focus on some of the key things, the infrastructure, kind of building up the BI platform, rather than working on reports for the end user or changing a bar chart to a line chart or things like that. All right, so that was my brief intro. We talked about the what and the why, and I just want to jump into demo, and again we're going to focus on PowerBI.com mostly. So I'm going to run this off of screenshots because it just tends to go faster, but I can toggle back to the live site in the Q&A or even here if I need to show something. So we're talking about PowerBI.com. You start on the site, and I'm going to turn off my mugshot so you can focus on the demo. Okay, there we go. So that's powerbi.com. You can enter if you haven't signed up, you can sign up for free. Just enter your email address, click this button, and you're in. Otherwise, just sign in. That work? Yeah, and the first thing you would do is you would get data. You would connect to some data. And we'll come back to this. And let's look at services. If you connect to that, there are a lot of online services which you can directly connect to and pull that data into Power BI. It's going to pull in the data set, reports, dashboards, everything. You can connect to databases, and there are a few options there. But mostly for Excel users, you would pick this option, connect to files. And when you go in there, you would see these options. You can connect to a local file or connect to a file on OneDrive. Now that has the OneDrive option is advantageous because let's say you open that file in your desktop, make some changes to it, update the model, add some measures, and you save it back. All your changes are going to be reflected in Power BI because it's connected to the file via OneDrive. You can upload it via local file. We'll choose this option. But then if you make changes, you have to just upload it again. So I click local file, and here's the file, by the way, that I'm going to be using. So it's just an Excel Power Pivot file. I've been using it. It's my standard AdventureWorks data set. You can see I've pulled in some tables. I have some Power View reports and so forth. So I go click on the local file, select the file, hit open, and it uploads the file. Tells me I'm done. And there are 3 new elements that you would see. Okay, just glancing at the questions real quick. The first would be the data set. Now that's the closest you're going to get to be able to see the data model, the Power Pivot data model, right? But it's all you're going to see is this data set. That symbolizes the data model for you. And there are a few options which we'll cover in a bit. Next, you will see report, and this one has pulled in the reports, Power View reports that were created in my Excel file. So those get automatically pulled in, which is good. And next thing you would see a dashboard, which initially would be empty. We will talk about each one of these elements. Let's start with creating reports. So here's your data set. When you click on these ellipses, you would see the option to explore. By the way, you can also just click on the name and that will give you the same result. It'll give you this blank canvas where you can draw. And this one is pretty straightforward. Anybody who has worked with Power View, of course, is going to find this familiar. Even if you worked with Excel pivot tables, this should feel really familiar. All you have to do is you see the field list just like you see it in Excel, and you explore, you click elements, and the only additional thing you do is you then choose the visualization. And there are lots of choices here, some cool new ones. There's a funnel chart, there's a gauge chart, and so forth. But you choose that visualization, but it's pretty much like building a pivot table field list. So you do that, and then you can click save this report as well. And now you have 2 reports, the one that was imported in, and now here's a new report connected to, both of them are connected to the same data set. And of course you can have a lot of these. So we saw our reports. Now let's look at dashboard, which is fundamentally new for Power BI. Even those folks who are familiar with Power View, there wasn't quite anything like dashboards in there. You build your dashboard by pinning visuals to it. So here I am in a report, but I can hover over one element and I'll see this thumbtack kind of option. It says pin visual, and if I click on it, it allows me to pin it to a dashboard. And this functionality is new in the latest release. Earlier, it would pin it to the last dashboard that was active, which, kind of worked for me. but clearly if you had lots of dashboards, or well, this is better, right? So now when you say pin, it says, hey, which one do you want to pin? Existing dashboard, and you can select from all the ones that you have, or you can create a new dashboard. But let's see what that pin does. So I click pin, it says pin to dashboard, and let's pin a few more elements, and then we'll go back and check out our dashboard. Now I switch to my other report. So earlier I was in my margin report, but now I switch to my other report, and I'm gonna click and pin this visual. And here I kind of sped up a bit. I also connected to a service, remember get data services, and connected to my MailChimp data and pulled that in. And this was all automatic. I didn't even change a thing. But here also I can come in, select a visual, and pin it. And the key point here, if you notice, is that I'm pinning visuals not just from different reports to the same data set. I'm pinning visuals from different data sets, from AdventureWorks, MailChimp, and of course if you had more, you could pin all of those in your dashboard. All right, well, enough talk about pinning. Let's go look at the dashboard. So here's what the dashboard is going to look like. It's going to have all the different elements that you pinned from your different reports. Now this is pretty customizable. You can click on it, resize these, move these around, and just lay them out the way you want. If you can, do try to fit them on one screen. If you can't, typically I prefer vertical scrolling because that works for people on tablets with touch-enabled devices as well as computer. You can just use the mouse wheel. So you can see I've pinned a whole bunch of different elements on my dashboard, and you can see it has all my AdventureWorks stuff, but it also has my MailChimp data pinned on the same dashboard. So again, dashboard, as the name implies, gives me a single place where I can kind of look at the highlighted metrics. You can also ask questions. If you notice up here, ask a question about the data in this dashboard. Let's try that out. As soon as you click on it, it's going to give you a list of kind of leading questions, which is great, right? For a new user to step into this, they see right away what possibly what other users are asking, what is being exposed in the data set just a little bit. So kind of eggs them on to say, hey, try typing these and see how it works. So we're going to type in cost by subcategory, and it completes. So as soon as it figures out what you're trying to do, it auto completes and shows you something. And the part that I like, that you can ask any question and pin that to your dashboard as well. So I can ask a question, get the desired result. Of course, you have all the ability to change it. You can say cost by subcategory as a line chart or something like that. Once you're done, once you're happy with the answer, you can just click it, pin the visual, and you can see cost by subcategory is now pinned to my dashboard. So reports and dashboards kind of work together. Dashboard gives you a centralized location to just kind of scan through the numbers. And when you're looking at a dashboard, something catches your eye, you can click on it. So I'm going to click on this element, and that takes you down to the underlying element. In this case, since I had pinned it from a report, the report opens up, and now I have all the data around the tile that I had pinned. If it was a Q&A pinned one, it'll open up to that question, and of course I can refine my question, type in something else, and so forth. So great. So we got to look at reports and dashboards. But it's no good if all you're doing is just, playing with it yourself. This is all about sharing. This is all about empowering your team, your organization. So being able to share this easily is key. So let's take a look at that. The unit of sharing in Power BI is dashboard. Okay, just glancing at the questions. Those are my pauses. Sorry, so I know you're probably asking some good questions or have some feedback. I'm only going to be able to get to it at the end. Okay, great. Let's keep going. Dashboard sharing. So when you click, the unit of sharing in Power BI is dashboard. So you see, click on AdventureWorks, 3 ellipses. You see share here, share dashboard there. There we go. 1 and 2. Both do the same thing. But if I were to click on a report, there's no sharing option. And so you can't share at that level, but hey, as long as you have a dashboard, you can share that. So I'm going to click Share Dashboard, and this pops up. You can type in your email address of somebody in your organization and just click Share. I do want to highlight a few elements on the screen. One, you can allow or disallow recipients to further share your dashboard. I mean, if it's a pretty open data set, you're not concerned about resharing and stuff, you can allow them to share. And hey, it's who knows, it'll spread from one to the other. And yeah, that's great, right? The more usage your report gets, the better. Otherwise, if it's perhaps sensitive data, then you can uncheck this box. So that's one option. Now this part took me by surprise the first time I started working with reports and dashboards. So here it does say recipients will have access to the same data and reports as you have in this dashboard. And you can click, and the article does have a lot of good information on this. But the key message here is that when I was sharing a dashboard, I thought that's all I was sharing. Well, not quite true. You actually are sharing the underlying reports and actually also the underlying data set. So just be aware. Sometimes you might send, I don't know, your CEO or somebody just a dashboard. I think that's all they can look at. No, they're going to be able to click into it and see the underlying report as well. So you better clean that up before you send it to the CEO. Furthermore, they will even be able to type in a question and just query your whole data set. So again, if you're sharing sensitive data, just be aware of that when you share a dashboard, you also share the underlying report and the data. The third element is shared with. It helps the owner keep track of, hey, who all has access to my dashboard. We'll come back to that and cover that. All right, so once you hit share, it says success, your dashboard has been shared successfully, and the person whom you shared it with will get an email, something like this, and they'll click Open AdventureWorks. They'll get to the Power BI site. They can sign up or sign in. In this case, John already has an account, so he's going to use that to sign in, and voila, he sees the report. Right, so he sees the AdventureWorks just the way you had shared it. Now, of course, if the data, we'll talk about refresh, but yeah, as long as the data is refreshed, then they will see the latest data all the time. I do want to point out this small icon here. This indicates that this is a shared report, right? So if you end up with a whole bunch of dashboards on your site, these icons will tell you that, hey, these are the ones which have been shared by somebody else. The others are probably owned by you. All right, and as I had said, so John, I had shared this with John, but John can, if they click on a tile, they will see the underlying report, even though you notice I don't really have any reports, but that's the functionality in Power BI. You share the dashboard, but the underlying stuff is shared as well. They can ask a question, they can click on it, go to the underlying report. They can further share this. So John can, since I had allowed resharing, they can click Share Dashboard. It does have a reminder up here that, hey, this one is not yours. The dashboard owner is somebody else. Great. But in this case, I can type in a new name, share it with somebody else. Now I want to switch back to my original account, the owner of the report, and show you something. So I'm going to switch back to that account. And I'm going to go back to dashboard. Notice this one doesn't have the sharing icon because this one is owned by me. And I'm going to click on Share Dashboard. And this is the piece that I had said I'll show you later. So now's the time to look at it. So when I click Shared With, it shows me the list of names, the list of groups that I've shared with. And I can also take action. For instance, if I click on this, I can stop sharing from this specific person. So that's how an owner can manage that. There are other ways of sharing. Some require you to have your Office 365 email run by Office 365. In that case, you can use distribution lists, and some other pro features allow you to share using groups and content packs. So I'm gonna speed through that again because some of it is pro, some of it may not apply to everybody, but give you a quick peek. So if you have Office 365 for email, you can share it with the whole team. So instead of typing like names of 10 members, you can just say use a DL product team at my org and share it with everybody. For the paid version, Power BI Pro, I believe that's like $9.99 per month per user. You have groups in Office 365, you can leverage those. You also have content packs, which lets you package up stuff, package up a data set, report, and dashboard together and have it be made available to your organization. If there's interest in that, I can come back and show that more. Just take a swig of water. Look at questions real quick. Okay, good questions. Sorry, I'm going to have to come back to them. So Jen Underwood, one of the PMs at Microsoft in the Power BI team, she referenced an article which said that you can increase the chances of the success of a BI project by 50% if you also include mobile. Right? So if you enable mobile, chances of success go up 50%. And I'm kind of an old school guy, I have to say. I'm always late to technology. I didn't own a cell phone for a long time, which is kind of odd for a guy who worked in Microsoft and even now works in tech. So I didn't quite, that would never have struck me that it was that important. But it is, right? If you look around, and you also realize that once you do have access to BI on a mobile device, that how easy does it get? Things just work better. So mobile is key, and that's a feather in the cap of Power BI. It plays along perfectly with mobile. So once you're logged in, you can click on this arrow and say download Power BI for mobile, and you would have options for Windows platform, for iOS, for Android, and you can download any of those. And I'm going to show you the Windows app, and you open that, and of course it's touch enabled. So you sign in, you see your dashboard reports, sample dashboards. Well, so let's try to open one. You can swipe in, look at the menu, and it shows you all your tiles. You can click on a tile to open it. You can toggle through that. You can swipe through that. You can also annotate, which is right here. So you click annotate, and this lets you draw, write something on there, and then share it with probably somebody in an organization, your peer, your colleague, somebody. I believe iOS also has capability to set up alerting, which means you can say, hey, if margin drops below X%, then alert me on my phone. That's not quite a great example, but I think that's really cool, just having that functionality. So mobile app, pretty cool. Let's talk about refresh. So we talk about generally with Power BI, Power Pivot, Power Query, all this sort of stuff, even if you're using it on Excel side. We have seen you can import and upload an Excel file onto PowerBI.com. But we talk about the server option, and you have a few options available. There's SSAS Tabular, there's SharePoint, and so forth. And one of the key leverages, one of the key benefits you're looking for going to the server option is ability to refresh automatically. And that's certainly available to you with Power BI. You can refresh in Power BI. There's also another option, which is kind of an offline option, which we'll talk about in a second. But let me show you the Power BI refresh. So you click on the data set and click Schedule Refresh, or well, you can click Refresh now. Schedule Refresh. And that lets you set up the refresh, and I'm not going to walk you through that. One thing I would point out is that if your data set connects to some local data, a local file or local database or something of that sort, then this is PowerBI.com. This is sitting off in the cloud. It's not going to have access to your local resources by default. For that, you need to set up Power BI Personal Gateway. This is a paid feature though, so you might get a warning if you're using free. It's going to say, hey, this data set contains on-premises data sources. You need to go Pro for that. The catch with Pro is typically it's no users or all users. So either all of your users in an organization are free, but if few of them are pro, then it might be challenging. For the workbooks that are using pro features like this data refresh, you're not going to be able to share it. Gosh, that's my understanding. So pro, it might be best to go upgrade everybody to pro just to make sure things work seamlessly. But your other option is Power Update. Now, full disclaimer, this is a third-party tool. This is made available by Power Pivot Pro. If you go to our site, you will notice on the sidebar this icon. Now, what this lets you do is this essentially lets you schedule a refresh on your desktop. So, kind of two options there. Power BI, this refresh would be kind of instigated on the cloud, even though using the personal gateway you can connect to on-premises sources, or you can use Power Update, which would run locally. It would really run on your desktop, and then it can publish the updated file up to Power BI. Either way, refresh is something integral which you should look at. So that's kind of the tour de force of Power BI. Now, in my blog post, I had mentioned that we're going to have a guest who's going to show us some live implementation of Power BI. Unfortunately, something came up, so they were not able to make it. So I'm going to fill in for that, and I'm going to show you talk a little bit about data modeling. Okay, so this little piece is important, so I'm going to bring myself back on here. Before we look into the demo of the data modeling, I wanted to highlight this specific blog post by the Power BI team. This one was Power BI in action, and this had two case studies about real implementations of Power BI. One of them was pretty impressive. This was the Australia tourism, and this is what it had to say. Now, of course, we're talking about a pretty large setup here. Global partner network, PR, digital, creative agencies, lots of data. And not really surprising, this was spread across apparently hundreds of spreadsheets and documents. But if you think about it, what do you think happened when they adopted Power BI? Right? We talked about Power BI promises BI for everyone, but what does that mean? Does that mean that you go from your hundreds of spreadsheets to hundreds of Power BI datasets? Maybe if you're using Power BI desktop instead of XLSX, the PBIX files? Gosh, I hope not. I mean, that's not really much of an improvement. Our tagline at Power Pivot Pro is leading the data revolution. And that change, going from hundreds of Excel workbooks to maybe hundreds of Power BI datasets, doesn't sound much like a revolution. It sounds maybe a slightly better way of doing the same old, same old. The real power in Power BI is driven by the data model. And you are going to leverage that when you combine your data models. In fact, just have a single data model. That's going to be far more powerful than those hundreds of data models which you might cook up. The approach you want to take is to focus on data modeling. So pull in all the data into your data model, right? Power Query is a great way to do that, but don't skip over the data model. Because once you do it right, the structure of the data model not only allows you to answer the questions that are being asked right now, but it also gives you the flexibility and agility to answer any questions that may be asked in the future. So with one data model, you can power then hundreds of reports. That's perfectly okay. Reporting actually becomes cheap. It becomes the last mile. But your data model is the core infrastructure. It's that core power grid, right? And that is key. But then the reporting is kind of like a light bulb. You can replace that easily, put that in easily. That becomes much easier. Having said that, let's look at Power BI Desktop. Get something going. Let me start that again. Alright, let's focus on the demo again. So here's Power BI Desktop. The best way to think of Power BI Desktop is that it's an accompaniment to PowerBI.com. So as I've said, you would not see those old terms if you are used to those. You would not see Power Query, Power Pivot, Power View, and so forth. You would see more generic terms, and we start with get data. But once you start engaging with it, you would realize it's really Power Query. But hey, I'm okay with that name change. I'm good with that actually. So you have a whole bunch of options, just like with Power Query. You have a long list of things here. I'll keep it simple. I'll connect to an Access database. So that's step one in building your data model. You connect to a data set. Now, of course, Power BI can handle large data sets, hundreds of millions of rows pretty easily. But the more beautiful part that I enjoy more is that you can connect to all sorts of data sets. You can connect to your corporate database, SQL, maybe pull something from Business Objects, SAP, but at the same time also have data fed in. You use an Excel file, maybe you maintain some mapping there, text file, a CSV maybe, which is being dumped by third party, and you can combine all of those together in the same model, and that's what really makes it powerful. Being able to pull in data from all sorts of sources, and still, of course, having the ability to have one-click refresh or scheduled automatic refreshes. Alright, I'm just gonna go ahead and load, although you can edit and that will launch you into Power Query. Actually, let's just do that real quick. So I click edit, and this interface should look very, very familiar to those who have used to Power Query. Notice the ribbon up top. I don't have any steps to do here, so I'm just going to click load. Now this makes a copy of that data into your model. Now Power BI is very good at compression. So even if you're pulling in large data sets, when you save this model, it's going to be compressed to a pretty small size, but it does make a copy. I want you to realize that. So now we have the data set, and this is going to feel definitely different to the Excel folks. So the closest you can come to seeing Power Pivot, the data model, is you click on this data icon and you see all the tables, and you click on the diagram view to see the relationships. So data modeling, when I talk about data modeling, I think of it as primarily two key steps. One is setting up relationships, the other is defining measures, and we'll do both. Now, of course, there's one step which precedes that, which is cleaning, shaping, transforming data before you bring it in, right? Every data set, actually any real data set, is not going to be as clean as the AdventureWorks one that I just pulled in, right? So that stuff is in Power Query. That you're going to do in your Power Query interface, cleaning, shaping, transforming. But once that's done, in your data modeling, you're going to create relationships and define measures. Now, Power BI Desktop automatically detects relationships, and it did do for 3 of these tables, but not the last one. So I'm just going to go manage relationships, this guy right here, and add that one. So I click new, I select my sales table, rate, order date, go to my calendar, and this one is connected to this field. Just by clicking those, I've specified that. I hit OK, close, and there you go. Now my relationship is created. So that part is done. Again, usually the heavy lifting there is on the cleanup side to create a clean lookup table. Now let's go back and create some measures. How fun. I'm going to do that in the report view. So you have 3 views here: report, data, and relationships. So report is similar to Power View if you are familiar with that. So it gives me a blank canvas. I'm going to go to sales, and I'm going to start with something really simple. So in my modeling ribbon here, I can say new measure. And again, it's going to feel different than the Excel add-in if you're used to that, but not by much, and it's certainly better in a lot of ways. So I'll say total sales equals, and this is what I like liked about DAX and Power Pivot and Power BI when I started with it, that this was so much Excel-like. Sum, I was used to sum. I knew exactly what sum did, right? So sum of this column makes logical sense, really no explanation needed, and the autocomplete just helps you all the way to define that formula. And let's define that as currency. Okay, let's try that again. Total sales. It did work. Not sure what the error was about. Great, so now I have my first measure, and I can put it up on my display here, and I can add maybe by year. Great. Let's just use a table. So again, building this on this canvas is just like your pivot table field list, but the only additional step you would think of is you would choose your visualization as well, and maybe I'm going to keep it a simple table right now. Let's try. Okay, I'm going to try a new measure, and somehow I was having some trouble with this, but we'll see how it works today. So I talked the data modeling, the core of it is relationships and measures. And measures are really the key functionality here. And I want to showcase an area where this really shines, which is time intelligence. Time intelligence is something which I found really hard to do, certainly in Excel, maybe even so with the kind of higher end BI tools, but DAX and Power BI makes it so much easier. So we're going to start with this function called calculate. It's probably one of my favorite functions in DAX, and it lets you alter the context in which the answer is evaluated. So we'll say calculate total sales, no change there. But now I'm going to say same period last year, and that's one of the time intelligence functions. And let's see how that works. All right, cool, that worked. So you can see in this pivot, in this table, it's showing me 2007 January and the sales for this year, but then the sales for prior year, right? And of course, same for the next month, and the next month, and so on. And what I like about these formulas is that they're ultimately flexible. So you're looking at it by year and month. You can take the month out, and it's still working at year level. You can drop in a quarter. Let's try that. If I can find the quarter, there it is. Year, quarter. Notice it is still working. So yeah, so with DAX, with these formulas, measures, what you get is this portability. Define once and use everywhere. Where you define a piece of logic where I said, hey, figure out sales prior year. And if you look at that, it's not even that complicated. I mean, look how compact this formula is. And that's it. That's your definition. And you can use it endlessly, in endless combination in any shape of the pivot using any of these attributes from your data set, right? So I didn't say anything about sales for a specific product or a prior year, sales prior for a specific product, but just by leveraging my model, I can add in, let's add in our customer gender. I'll make that a slicer, and I'll add in a product category, make that a slicer, and again, define once, use everywhere. So all of this, I can just select on bikes or clothing or accessories or both, and that works. I can say only show me for males, only show me for females, and all it does just transforms. Compare that to the world in Excel, where to build something like this, you would have a sheet full of formulas, and the worst part, that those formulas are not portable. They're going to be tied down to the very exact shape of report that you needed. And as soon as your manager says, hey, that looks great, but give me ABC, a slight change, you're going to have to almost start over from scratch. Here, most likely all you would do is just, just make one change in your field list. All right, let's do one other measure. So we have year, let's bring in month num. Great, and I want to add, and I want to beat on that time intelligence, which I think is such a novelty in Power Pivot. So we'll do sales year to date. Again, a very common calculation, not always easy to do, certainly not in this portable manner. I'm going to say calculate. That's a trusty function. Dates, year to date, and we'll refer to our date table. Got that. Let's come back and format it. And let's add it to our pivot. Maybe I'm going to take prior year out. And you can see, whereas this one in the same table, I can see just for that month, or I can see kind of a running total. And you can see this is year to date. That means it resets. It's going to reset and add an year boundary, right? So in here, it's going to start all over again. And again, this is going to be ultimately portable and flexible. You can slice and dice it any way you want. You can change the shape of the pivot, and it's still going to work. Okay, cool. That was my demo of Power BI Desktop. Give you a little bit of the flavor of the real power behind it, the data modeling. So we talked about what and why. That was pretty quick. We spent most of the time in the PowerBI.com demo. Hopefully that was helpful. And lastly, we covered the Power BI Desktop. So friends, that's what I have right now. I'm going to jump to your questions. We do have an online course. If the data modeling part kind of intrigued you, sounds interesting, we do have a live course coming up on October 5 and 6. So that's an online course. You can attend it from the comfort of your home or office. But it's going to be a live course. I'm going to be there. And hey, there's a discount code if you care about it. We hope you enjoyed that recording. We had one whole additional hour of Q&A after this. And we do hope you join us for our future webinars.